starting with number 1, Panzer III, a German tank that entered service in 1939, formed the backbone of the early Blitzkrieg, spearheading the invasions of Poland and France before grinding through the deserts of North Africa against British armor. Its early 37mm gun gave way to a long 50mm cannon by 1941, and a disciplined crew layout with a dedicated commander free to scan the battlefield let German tankers outmaneuver and outfight opponents who often had thicker armor, but far worse internal coordination. A tactical edge that proved as lethal as any cannon. 2. Charbie 1 bis, a French tank introduced in 1935, carried a hull-mounted 75mm gun powerful enough to punch through German armor at close range during the chaotic 1940 campaign. And at times it did exactly that, stalling panzer columns in isolated engagements near Stonn. But its single-man turret overworked the commander with gunnery, loading, and navigation simultaneously. Its fuel tanks ran dry within a few hours of hard driving, and abandoned, fuel-starved hulks soon littered French roads. Many captured intact and turned against their former owners. 3. Matilda II, a British tank fielded in 1939, carried armor so thick that Italian and early German anti-tank guns simply bounced off it during the 1940 fighting in North Africa, earning it the nickname Queen of the Desert after routing Italian forces at Beit Afam. That reputation collapsed at the Battle of Arras, and again in Libya once German crews learned to level their 88mm anti-aircraft guns horizontally against it, exposing the Matilda's painfully slow speed and weak 2-pounder gun as fatal liabilities that no amount of armor could fix. 4. KV-1, a Soviet heavy tank rushed into combat in 1941, proved nearly invulnerable to standard German tank and anti-tank guns during the opening weeks of Operation Barbarossa, with a single KV-1 famously blocking an entire German column near Rosini for almost 2 days before being destroyed by artillery fire. Its thick armor terrified German crews, yet a fragile transmission and chronic mechanical breakdowns left far more KV-1s abandoned by the roadside than were ever destroyed in direct combat, a flaw that quietly undercut its battlefield legend. 5. T-34, introduced by the Soviet Union in 1940, combined sloped armor, a powerful 76mm gun, and a simple design built for mass production. And when German forces met it in 1941, they reported what they called T-34 shock, an unsettling realization that their own tanks could no longer guarantee victory on the Eastern Front. Early models suffered from poor optics and a cramped 2-man turret that forced the commander to also aim and load, a flaw that cost lives in close engagements until a later redesign finally corrected it. 6. Panzer IV, Germany's mainstay medium tank from 1936 onward, was upgunned in 1942 with a long-barreled 75mm cannon capable of killing a T-34 at range. And from that point it carried the weight of German armored divisions on every front from Russia to Normandy until the war's final days. Its true lethality came not from any single innovation, but from sheer adaptability, absorbing upgrade after upgrade in armor and firepower, while heavier, more ambitious designs struggled endlessly with reliability and production delays. 7. M3 Stuart, an American light tank fielded in 1941, gave British and American crews a fast, mechanically dependable reconnaissance vehicle nicknamed Honey for its smooth ride, and it dealt effectively with Japan's lighter armor across the Pacific Island campaigns. Against German guns in North Africa, however, its thin plating and small 37mm cannon left it badly overmatched, and crews learned quickly through costly experience to avoid standing toe-to-toe with anything heavier than enemy reconnaissance vehicles. 8. M3 Lee, an American medium tank rushed into service in 1941, mounted a 75mm gun in a fixed hull sponson to counter German armor in North Africa before a proper turreted design was ready for combat. Its firepower briefly leveled the field against Rommel's Afrika Korps, but its towering, multi-level silhouette made it one of the easiest targets on the battlefield, and German gunners exploited that height mercilessly, picking off lees that lesser tanks might have survived. 9. Crusader. A British cruiser tank introduced in 1941, was built for speed across the open desert and could outrun almost anything else in North Africa. But its mechanical fragility became legendary among its own crews, with breakdowns sidelining entire squadrons before a single shot was fired in anger. Combined with an undersized 2-pounder gun incapable of penetrating newer German armor, the Crusader suffered crushing losses during Operation Crusader and the disastrous fighting at Gazala in 1942. 10. Type 95 Hago, Japan's standard light tank from 1935. Swept through Malaya, the Philippines, and China against poorly equipped defenders, its speed and mechanical reliability, well suited to jungle terrain and open plains alike. Once it met American M4 Shermans during the Pacific Island campaigns, its thin riveted armor proved unable to stop even rifle-caliber anti-tank rounds at close range, and Japanese crews paid for that weakness in lopsided, often one-sided engagements that ended before they could close to effective range. 11. Type 97 Chiha, Japan's standard medium tank from 1937, fought across China, Malaya, and the Philippines as the most capable armor Japan could field early in the war, later upgunned with a 47mm cannon in an attempt to better answer Allied tanks. By 1944 it remained hopelessly outclassed by the Sherman's armor and firepower, and Japanese tank crews on islands like Saipan and Okinawa were frequently destroyed in minutes before they could maneuver into a position to fight back. 12. Valentine, a British infantry tank introduced in 1940, earned a reputation for mechanical reliability rare among British designs of the period. Serving in North Africa and supplied in large numbers to the Soviet Union under Lend-Lease throughout the war, its dependability could not compensate forever for modest armor and a gun that fell behind newer threats. And by mid-war it had been relegated to secondary and reconnaissance roles rather than frontline tank duels. 13. Panzer 38T, a Czechoslovak design absorbed into German service in 1939, fought through Poland, France, and the opening of Barbarossa as a capable and reliable light tank, but its true legacy emerged later, when its dependable chassis was stripped of its turret to birth a far deadlier vehicle entirely. By 1942, the original tank version had been withdrawn from frontline combat, proving more valuable as a foundation for future designs than as a tank in its own right. 14. Stu G3, a German assault gun introduced in 1940, dispensed with a rotating turret to keep its profile low and its production costs manageable, and by war's end it had become the single highest-scoring armored vehicle fielded by any nation, credited with destroying thousands of enemy tanks across every front. Its low silhouette let crews ambush from concealment, a tactic that proved more decisive in practice than raw armor thickness or gun caliber ever could on its own. 15. KV-2, a Soviet heavy tank introduced in 1940, mounted a massive 152mm howitzer originally meant for demolishing bunkers, and in the desperate defensive fighting of 1940, a single shell could obliterate a German tank outright at any range. Its enormous box-shaped turret traversed too slowly to track fast-moving targets and made the vehicle impossible to miss on an open battlefield. And Soviet commanders halted production within months once its vulnerabilities to flanking attacks became impossible to ignore. 16. M4 Sherman, America's standard medium tank from 1942, rolled off assembly lines by the tens of thousands and carried Allied armor divisions through North Africa, Normandy, and the Pacific, its true strength lying in numbers and dependability rather than raw firepower. German crews nicknamed it Ronson for its tendency to erupt in flames when penetrated, a flaw traced to exposed ammunition racks that later wet stowage modifications significantly reduced, though the reputation among Allied tankers never fully faded. 17. Churchill, a British infantry tank introduced in 1941, sacrificed speed for armor thick enough to shrug off most contemporary anti-tank guns, and it could climb terrain that stopped lighter vehicles cold. It suffered a brutal baptism at the failed Dieppe raid in 1942, where many became stranded and were destroyed on the shingle beaches before they ever left the landing craft area. But it later proved its worth in the close, grinding terrain of Italy and Normandy. 18. Tiger I, a German heavy tank introduced in 1942, paired an 88mm gun with armor that most Allied weapons could not penetrate frontally, and individual Tigers achieved staggering kill counts, including Michael Wittmann's destruction of more than a dozen vehicles in minutes at Villers-Bocage in 1944. Its complex drivetrain and enormous fuel consumption meant that, across the war, more Tigers were abandoned or scuttled by their own crews after mechanical failure than were ever destroyed in direct combat. 19 T-70, a Soviet light tank introduced in 1942, supplemented overstretched T-34 production lines and served capably in reconnaissance roles during the war's middle years on the Eastern Front. As German armor grew heavier and better armed throughout 1943, the T-70's light gun and thin plating left it increasingly unable to contribute to frontline tank battles, and it was steadily withdrawn from that combat role as Soviet factories shifted toward more capable designs. 20 Su-152, a Soviet self-propelled gun introduced in 1943, mounted a 152mm howitzer on a heavy tank chassis specifically to counter the new German Tigers and Panthers appearing at the Battle of Kursk, and crews nicknamed it Zvereboy, the Beast Hunter. A single direct hit could tear a turret clean off a Tiger or collapse a Ferdinand's hull entirely, and its psychological impact on German crews matched its considerable physical destructiveness on the battlefield. 21 Panther, Germany's answer to the T-34 Shock, entered service in 1943 with sloped armor and a high-velocity 75mm gun capable of killing enemy tanks at ranges few opponents could return fire from. Rushed into production ahead of schedule, its first combat outing at Kursk was marred by engine fires and transmission failures that destroyed more Panthers in the days before the battle than Soviet gunners managed during it, a flaw only partially resolved in later production batches. 22 Ferdinand, also known as Elephant, a German tank destroyer introduced in 1943, carried an 88mm gun powerful enough to destroy any Soviet tank at extreme range from behind nearly impenetrable frontal armor. Its designers omitted a machine gun for close defense, an oversight Soviet infantry exploited at Kursk by swarming the vehicles and destroying them with explosive charges and Molotov cocktails at point-blank range. A fate its formidable frontal armor could do absolutely nothing to prevent. 23. M10 Wolverine, an American tank destroyer introduced in 1942, paired a 3-inch gun with a thin, open-top turret designed for ambush tactics across North Africa, Italy, and Normandy. That open top kept production light and crew visibility excellent, but it also left crews exposed to artillery airbursts, grenades, and small arms fire from above, a trade-off that cost lives even as the vehicle racked up impressive kill totals from concealed defensive positions. 24. Cromwell, a British cruiser tank introduced in 1943, gave British armored divisions genuine speed for the Normandy campaign, able to exploit breakthroughs that slower, heavier designs could not reach in time to capitalize on. Its thin armor and modest 75mm gun left it badly outmatched whenever it encountered a Panther or Tiger head-on, forcing crews to rely on mobility, terrain, and overwhelming numbers rather than firepower simply to survive the engagement. 25. T-34-85, an upgraded Soviet tank introduced in 1944, finally corrected the original T-34's flawed turret by adding a third crewman and a more powerful 85mm gun, restoring rough parity with the German Panther on the battlefield. Produced in overwhelming numbers through the war's final year, it carried Soviet forces through Belarus, Poland, and ultimately into Germany itself, its sheer quantity compensating for any remaining technical disadvantage against better armored German opponents. 26. Sherman Firefly, a British modification introduced in 1944, fitted the reliable Sherman hull with a powerful 17-pounder gun capable of killing Tigers and Panthers frontally, something few other Allied tanks in Normandy could claim with any confidence. German crews reportedly learned to identify Fireflies by their distinctively long barrel and prioritized destroying them first in any engagement. A grim testament to just how dangerous a single well-armed conversion had become on the battlefield. 27. Panther, a German tank destroyer introduced in 1944, mounted the same devastating 88mm L/71 gun as the Tiger II within a low, sloped Panther-based hull, making it widely regarded as one of the most effective armored killers of the entire war. Chronic fuel shortages and limited production numbers in the war's final year, however, meant far fewer reached the front than its formidable battlefield reputation might otherwise suggest to viewers today. 28. Hetzer, a German tank destroyer introduced in 1944, repurposed the dependable Panzer 38T chassis into a small, low-profile ambush vehicle that proved difficult to spot and devastating in defensive fighting throughout 1944 and 1945. Its cramped interior left little room for the crew to work efficiently under combat stress, and its gun's severely limited traverse meant the entire vehicle often had to be repositioned just to track a single moving target. 29. M18 Hellcat, an American tank destroyer introduced in 1944, became the fastest-tracked combat vehicle of the entire war. Built around hit-and-run tactics that let it strike and disappear before German gunners could properly respond. That speed came at the cost of armor so thin that almost any return fire proved fatal to the crew inside, making the Hellcat a weapon that rewarded precision and discipline while punishing the smallest tactical mistake severely. 30. IS-2, a Soviet heavy tank introduced in 1944, carried a 122mm gun originally designed for naval and coastal defense use, and a single round could obliterate a German heavy tank or collapse an entire fortified building in one shot. It proved decisive during the brutal urban combat of the Battle of Berlin in 1945, where its raw destructive power against fortified strongpoints mattered far more than its notably slow rate of fire. 31. ISU-152, a Soviet assault gun refined through 1943 and 1944, inherited the Beast Hunter nickname from its predecessor and brought that same overwhelming firepower to the rubble-strewn streets of Berlin in the war's final weeks. Its turretless design sacrificed flexibility for armor and a punch strong enough to dismantle fortified positions and enemy armor, alike in a single devastating shot at close urban range. 32. Tiger II, known as the King Tiger, a German heavy tank introduced in 1944, combined the thickest armor and most powerful gun of any tank to see service in the war, an 88mm L/70, one capable of destroying virtually anything at long range. Its nearly 70-ton weight strained its engine and transmission beyond their design limits, and during the Ardennes offensive far more King Tigers were lost to mechanical failure and fuel shortages than to enemy fire. 33. Jagdtiger, a German tank destroyer introduced in 1944, mounted a 128mm gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at ranges where it could not even be clearly seen, making it theoretically the most lethal vehicle fielded during the entire war. Its engine was never powerful enough for its crushing weight of over 70 tons, leaving most examples broken down far from the front. A deadly design ultimately undone by its own overwhelming mass. 34. Sturmtiger, a rare German assault vehicle introduced in 1944, fired a 380mm rocket mortar designed to flatten fortified buildings and entire city blocks in a single devastating shot, proving particularly effective in the close confines of urban warfare. Fewer than 20 were ever built before the war ended, and that scarcity meant it influenced isolated battles in cities like Aachen rather than the broader course of the conflict as a whole. 35. Comet, a British cruiser tank introduced in 1944, finally gave British crews a 77mm gun capable of standing up to German medium armor on something closer to equal terms, correcting flaws that had plagued earlier cruiser designs throughout the war's middle years. It arrived too late to meaningfully shape the war's outcome, seeing combat only in its final months as Germany's defenses across Europe were already collapsing under Allied pressure. 36 M26 Pershing, an American heavy tank introduced in 1945, mounted a 90mm gun specifically built to finally match German heavy armor after years of frustrated Sherman crews struggling against Tigers and Panthers with inadequate firepower. It saw only limited action before the war ended in Europe, but the engagements it did fight, including duels near Cologne, demonstrated that American tankers could at last trade blows with German heavies on roughly even terms. 37 IS-3, a Soviet heavy tank unveiled in 1945, introduced a revolutionary pike-nose hull shape that deflected incoming rounds far more effectively than any flat-faced armor design before it, though it arrived too late in the war to ever fire a shot in anger against German forces. Its appearance alone in the Berlin Victory Parade was enough to unsettle Western observers and reshape global tank design philosophy for the decade that followed. 38 Nashorn, a German tank destroyer introduced in 1943, carried the same powerful 88mm gun as the Tiger on a lightly armored open-top chassis, giving it the reach to kill enemy tanks well before they could close the distance to return fire. That same thin armor made it deadly only at range, and any Soviet tank that managed to close the gap and get within a few hundred meters could destroy it with relative ease. 39 Marder III, a German tank destroyer introduced in 1942, mounted captured Soviet or domestic German guns on a light, open-top chassis as a hasty answer to the shock of facing the T-34, buying critical time until better-designed vehicles could reach the front. Its lack of armor and overhead protection left crews exposed to artillery and infantry fire, and losses among Marder crews ran consistently high despite the vehicle's genuine lethality when firing from range. 40 Brummbär, a German assault gun introduced in 1943, mounted a 150mm howitzer behind heavy frontal armor to flatten fortified positions and infantry strongpoints, proving its worth in the grinding battles of Kursk, Italy, and later Normandy. Its considerable weight made it slow and difficult to maneuver through rubble-filled streets, and its limited gun traverse left it dangerously vulnerable whenever an enemy could maneuver to its flank rather than meet it directly head-on. If you enjoyed this look at the deadliest tanks of World War II, there's plenty more battlefield history still to uncover. Join us for more stories of legendary machines, forgotten weapons, and the wars that shaped history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.